Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone.
Mm.
Daniel,
Yes.
can you let me know when everybody is assembled and when we can start?
Yeah, sure. There's a couple more people joining and then we should be ready to go.
Thank you so much.
That seems to be everyone made their way in. Someone's struggling to connect, but it should be.
Should we give them 30 more seconds or so?
Yeah.
There we go. Is that a full house?
That's everyone let in that was in the waiting room.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. And it's very kind of you all to take the time out to come and meet today. The reason I've called this meeting is to learn, and with approaching this subject with great humility and a desire to understand more and to see what more I can do through understanding in terms of advocacy, both in government to ministers and so on, and also working with local organizations and groups and faith groups and families and so on to deal with the issue of mental health. Now, my concerns have been heightened of late in Wakefield because I've asked the clinical commissioning group, and I've been looking at the data, and although the data seem to suggest that the rates of suicide and attempted suicide have not, in fact, gone up in Wakefield over the last year with the successive lockdowns and the stresses and strains on people and the insecurity on jobs and incomes that have come with the pandemic. Certainly, if the quantitative data suggests that, it's not what's reflected with the qualitative data that I'm dealing with in terms of my constituents that write to me or I speak to, business owners that I talk to, and other events. The number of friends, family, constituents that tell me about people they know that have been brought, whose mental health is suffering terribly, and that have attempted suicide. Various people who write to me about just stopping by the side of the road and speaking to people when they're about to jump off bridges within Wakefield and then having a word with them, continuing on. None of that, I presume, I may be mistaken, is recorded as the figures. So I have a suspicion, and I want you to let me know whether it's a necessary concern and suspicion, but that the unreported levels of depression and suicide and the factors that promote this are far higher than possibly we believe. And if that is the case, and even if it isn't, what we can do to help. And, you know, I believe that suicide and mental health is what I will always still continue, even though there are many mental health experts and better than me, to use the word commit suicide. The reason is not because it's an offense, but because I believe that we are all guilty as society in making a world and a society in which people feel so alone, so helpless, and so unsupported, where suicide becomes thought of as being necessary. And so I think it's an evil that we all have. So that's basically why I've called this, and I'm very interested to learn. So I think the best way for us to start is to do just that. And I will invite each and every one of you, if you wish, to give me I'm afraid that Daniel is being very, very strict on times and so on. if you could all provide a 2-minute update on your take on the current situation for in Wakefield, for your organisation and your current role and what that means for your role. But please, I do ask you, given the number of invitees, to keep your try to keep to that time limit. Also, I wish to make you all know that this is being live streamed on Facebook. Is it Facebook or YouTube, Daniel?
Facebook, and then it'll be uploaded to YouTube afterwards due
I
to the
believe that
technical
because
issues.
Parliamentary Zoom accounts don't let you record on the parliamentary Zoom account, so it's having to be done via another measure. So just so you're all aware of that, as and when you make your comments. So who may I ask would like to go first?
If everyone would like to raise their hand by pressing the raise hand button on the reactions, we'll then ask people to speak in order.
Oh yes, you can raise your hand, or you can put a note in the chat room, and Daniel will monitor that and tell me who's the order of things. By the way, Daniel, I don't see Councillor Fishwick. Could he not make it?
I've just messaged him to see if he's having technical issues.
Okay.
First, Neil Wayne from Andy's Man Club, please. You're the first with your hand up.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Neil from Andy's Man Club, one of the project development champions, new to the role, but I've been a member of Andy's Man Club since September 2018. Andy's Man Club in Wakefield just actually moved venue recently due to all the lockdown stuff. We were based at Wakefield Trinity. We're now at the Elite Trading Centre on Silcoats Road. It's a good group. It's got a lot of regular guys in there highlighting the issue of obviously mental health in guys sort of 18 and over. Around the country, sort of mirrors around the country really. It's not just, obviously we're talking about Wakefield, but it's not just solely a Wakefield issue. This is a nationwide epidemic, if you like. You know, people are literally just taking their lives, and it's COVID over the last year has obviously added to that stress. Within that, we've now opened an online group that runs alongside. So obviously the face-to-face meetings, some people can't attend those for shielding reasons, or don't want to and feel a lot safer in this format. So it's faces on a screen. They do open up very well in those sessions. We have guys who have been coming for so long, and sometimes it's their only form of communication. They don't have family and friends they can talk to, and getting into this kind of group is the only support that they get. And we need to keep offering that support and make sure that those guys are getting that safe space to come and talk in a totally non-judgmental environment and get stuff off the chest. And getting that stuff off the chest can be as little as having, you know, something, it's not a bad day about anything. It could be anything. It could have had a flat tyre. And that could be something enough to send anybody over the edge. It could be that, you know, just disaster after disaster. There's no one size fits all on this. You know, and it's not a game of top trumps. It's not a case of who's had the most disasters and who hasn't and what scale it's on. The fact is that we need to be there to offer support to these men and give them that safe space. And at AMC, that's what we continue to do and will continue to do so. And I know a lot of faces on here do point people in our direction. That's massively, massively appreciated.
Well, thank you, Neil. So what you're saying there as well is, it rings true with what Sam have told me, that it's there's a lot of cumulative drivers that lead to that a particular break or a snap or a sense of hopelessness from a diverse range of issues.
Absolutely, yeah.
And for the men that you're talking almost exclusively of men of all age groups, loneliness is does loneliness seem to affect are there particular characteristics of the age group or demographics or backgrounds of the men that feel loneliness and that social isolation? How do we tackle that, do you think?
There's no age to define loneliness. Absolutely no age to define loneliness. And that's even going away from the age group we do, that's 18 and above. Loneliness can start from a young age. You know, kids who are getting home from school and they've got nobody to talk to, the parents aren't particularly interested in what they're doing. You know, it's something that needs support, it needs help. Our club, obviously, it's known for being to help stop people committing suicide and to tackle depression. but we have guys who turn up on a Monday night purely because it is the only social interaction that they will get until the following Monday. And that's vitally important. It's vitally important that we give them that safe space to come and be amongst other men and talk freely and talk openly and knowing there's no fear of any kind of judgment whatsoever. They're all there. They're the same. They can be CEOs of large companies. There can be somebody who's been living on streets for 12 months. Anything in between. When they're in that room for 2 hours on a Monday night, they're all exactly the same. They've all got that same opportunity to get that support. And with it being peer-to-peer support, you're sat in a room full of guys who have gone through a storm, are going through a storm, and can really relate to the problems that those guys have got. But yeah, loneliness there's no age to define loneliness. That can be from young teenagers upwards, without a doubt.
Thank you, Neil.
Pleasure.
You provoked a lot more questions, which I'll ask them in the end. I'm sure we'll get through to discussions. Daniel, who's the next contributor?
Gary from Health Watch, please.
Thank you.
Hello,
Gary.
everyone. My name's Gary Jevon. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Health Watch Wakefield, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this today. Our role in the local system is to provide information, advice and signposting to people who need it, but we are also there to gather the views and experiences of people across the district on how they're finding health and care services being delivered. This has been really especially important over the last 12 months or so during the pandemic, and we've run a number of surveys, engagement events, focus groups, things like that to try and find out how people are coping during that period. Some really sort of high level statistics of what we've been finding is that 85% of people that we spoke to have said that the pandemic has had some sort of impact on their mental health during the last year. 60% of those have told us that they didn't know where they could get support for this from. And another 30% have said that they've tried to access support, but it wasn't available when they needed it. 1 in 10 have told us about the difficulties of finding clear information online when they need it. And around about 40% of people have said that they would have liked a local organisation to contact them to offer support. This has been highlighted by many people as an area for improvement in the system at the moment. Finally, 25% of people did say that they were contacted by local organisations for support, but agreed that this could be an area that could be strengthened. Just today, we've also published a report on findings into what young people are telling us about their experiences during the experiences of health and care services during the pandemic. And again, the issue of waiting times for mental health support, particularly CAMHS, has come up again. It is something that we know has improved a lot over the last few months, but young people are still telling us that this is something that they are experiencing difficulties with. Apart from that, we really welcome the opportunity to work with everybody on the call here and try and find ways to make things better for people across our district. We're aware that we have had a number of people have come forward to tell us their experiences, but it's just really the tip of the iceberg, and we suspect that there are many, many more people out there who are struggling and haven't had the opportunity to have their voice heard. Thank you, everyone. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Gary. Now, if I could just drill down slightly, you mentioned it's the tip of the iceberg, and I think that's very much the case. When you say, first of all, in terms of these concerning statistics, how many people were surveyed?
Altogether, we're looking at about 600 or 700.
Gosh, quite a large one.
Yeah.
Across Wakefield.
Across Wakefield, yeah, just Wakefield districts.
That's quite a large number. And
so that's including the 2 big surveys, the focus group and the children's survey.
Were they done? Was that a random approach, or people that contacted you? How did you?
A bit of both. We did try to publicise the survey as much as we could, and we've got it out through our sort of networks of colleagues and contacts and stakeholders. Other organisations across the system have helped publicise it and get the word out about the surveys as well. They were mostly done online, so we also recognise that there's an issue there that may provide a barrier to some people who haven't got access to that sort of technology. But we did also have the option to have it done as a paper-based format, so people could complete a survey pro forma and return it to us via free post in an attempt to tackle that digital exclusion agenda piece.
sorry for the slightly nerdy questions, Gary. I'm a bit of a data geek in terms of those sort of things. When you say 85% had an impact,
yeah,
did you manage to grade the severity of impact? Because one of the things, and I'd be grateful if people could help explain this to me as well, is, as I said, this is not really my area. I'm trying to learn. I'm approaching with great humility. When we talk about mental health issues and so on, it seems to me, I'm not terribly old, but we've moved on a long way from where we used to talk about mental health when I was young. I'm 47 now. You know, when, where one talked about mental health acts and committing people and so on and so forth, to now, and essentially what we regard as almost insanity and manic behaviors, and bipolarism and so on and so forth, to now where we have a more sophisticated, maybe we could say, appreciation of mental health issues, which accepts all the drivers that Andy was talking about earlier, but also how it just is about not being particularly happy or anxiety or concerns and so on and so forth. So when we're talking about 85% have an impact, did you manage to say which end of that spectrum we're at? And also, when I'm thinking about mental health issues, what should I be, what's that universe I should be thinking about when I define mental health issues as? Because I was having a conversation with somebody else the other day, and when we were talking about mental health issues, much younger than me, a decade or so younger than me, and they had a much older fashioned view of mental health issues than me in terms of what we would all used to call insanity or whatever. So where do we phrase all of this? What's the language we use?
So first of all, we did grade it during the surveys. We had a 3 or 4 stage point. So there was like some or moderate effect, and then high effect, high impact, very high impact. And the results of those were 55% of people had said it was high or a very high impact on their mental health. So only 30% of the people that were telling us that it had some impact were saying it was at a level that was some moderate, or they were able to control themselves or with the support of family or friends. So it's still over half. It's high, very high. In terms of the definition of mental health issues, we did leave it deliberately vague for people to sort of self-identify what they thought that meant to them, rather than trying to specify exactly what high or very high meant. It was very much a personal, subjective opinion.
Thank you, Gary. I'd be very grateful, if you don't mind, if you could share your data or report with me. If you could get that sent to Daniel or to myself directly, I'd be very grateful. I'd be very interested to look at it.
Yep, absolutely. I'll make sure that happens shortly to everybody else. It is available on our website, so we'll make sure the links are available as well. Thank you
very much, Gary. Daniel?
Thank you. Dave from Mint, please.
Afternoon. My name is David Simpson. I'm the operations director for a group called Mint Men in Need Together. We're similar to Andy's Man Club. We're a peer-to-peer support group. Most of my dealings, to be honest, have been with Leeds and in the Leeds area, with their mental health teams over here. But yeah, I think what you're touching on earlier, I think empathy now is becoming more and more prevalent, because during the pandemic, more and more people are getting an understanding of mental health issues. People are really struggling. And I think to have true empathy for it, you really need to have gone through it yourself. Otherwise, it's really difficult to explain some of it to people. We're still running our groups, luckily. We've got great venues that are helping us out. And we're running Zoom groups as well. As I say, similar to Imran Club, our groups, they've all got their own WhatsApp chat, so they're able to communicate with each other. There's always somebody there at the end for issues. We are noticing a lot more traffic coming through our page. And Gary touched on waiting lists, and luckily there are groups such as ours and such as Andy's Man Club that are able to fill a stopgap. We know there's GP surgeries in our areas that signpost to us and other organisations as well. But it's the people that aren't meeting these groups main problem for us, I'd say, is where to some team too. After the GP, they're overrun, and I think can be a breakdown in communication between those teams at times. So I think trying to get all of these teams that are working together, communicating better and speaking together, I think would have a great long-term effect.
Thank you, Dave. Daniel?
Yeah, Stan Foster, please.
You're on mute, Stan, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. It's called multitasking. I'm a man. I can't do everything at the same time. Okay.
Join the club.
First of all, thank you for the invitation. My name's Stan Foster. I manage a Wakefield-based charity. It's called GASP. We're basically a counselling charity that we've been going in Wakefield for over 20 years. We brief history of us. About 3 or 4 years ago, we did set up Andy's Man Club at the Gas building. It is highly successful, fully support Andy's Man Club, and it's outgrown us, and they've obviously moved on. We're also involved with Wakefield Safe Space, and this is a really new initiative supporting people. It's an out-of-hours service along with Bridget, I've seen on the Bridget Gill and Touchstone Leeds. This is an out-of-hours that gives virtual and physical space. It's based in the Art House in Wakefield. At the moment, it's open 6 while midnight on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday evening, and it gives emotional support. And we're hopefully by April it's going to be open 7 days a week, and it's funded by thankfully funded by CCG. But it's delivered by, it's a partnership approach. The local partners are Spectrum People, which is Bridget's on the line, GASP and Touchstone. GASP, as I say, we're a counselling charity. We deliver person-centred counselling. We work with a lot of people that have suicidal tendencies. We deliver counselling in blocks of 6 sessions at a time. It is jointly reviewed on the 6th session. I've worked with too many people in the past that have gone to different agencies and had 6 sessions and that's it, bye-bye. This is not a fixed term. We work with people until we get it right, or until that person's empowered enough to move on. Okay, and we cover the district of Wakefield. My main problem from a small Wakefield charity is that we spend half our time, or more than half our time, looking for funding to survive. Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Stan.
Sorry, I pre-lockdown, sorry, I'm interrupted. Pre-lockdown, I'm a great believer in support groups. And we had support groups in Wakefield. We also had it in other parts of the district, such as in the southeast, in Southampton and in Castleford as well. So a great big believer of that. And it should be led by the people that have these support, the people that's got the lived experience. It is so vitally important. So, okay, I'll stop now.
Well, a couple of things that you said. So you're working at the moment, 6 till midnight, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Is that even through the pandemic? That must be very challenging.
The safe space has been working constantly through the pandemic. It started just before Christmas, and we're working. Yes, it is, but we're working safely through the pandemic. But we're also working virtually as well. That's the safe space part of it. Yes, as a charity, GASP has continued to deliver counselling services through the pandemic, but that's being done via the telephone.
And I'm glad as well, Stan, you raised the issue of funding, and I'm pleased that you get funding from the CCG, and we all need more of it. But what I want to know is, I want this session as well to help identify any upcoming or new opportunities for us together to improve mental health care and facilities and outreach in Wakefield. And by that, I don't think it's necessarily only about a blanket statement of needing more money, although clearly in many cases that is the case too, but also what opportunities, be they large or small, are there that together or with innovative approaches, we can improve mental health. And so if we can identify those, then we can work towards getting that done too. And then also, what events or outreach or campaigns can we together as a group cooperatively push forward to get to more people, raise awareness and get more people involved? And of course, this also has a knock-on effect in terms of awareness and fundraising from further with wider appreciation of local people doing necessary work that help local people. Not only can we help tackle the issue, but also possibly find ways to resolve some of the funding problems too. So if everybody, when they continue to speak as well, it's very good that Stan brought that up. Think about how we can do that, whether by employing me to help advocate, and whether in government and locally, but also by employing, I meant using me. I'm not looking for a job, I got one. And also how we can work together cooperatively for those ends. But thank you for that, Stan.
Can I just add one small thing, please? I'm going to speak generally as a third sector organisation, and I know there's other third sector organisations here. Can we work in partnership with mainstream services? Because if we're going to reach, and we're serious about reaching, vulnerable people who are hard to reach, the third, those vulnerable people are less frightened of the third sector than they are of mainstream services. So I'm begging you, use the third sector to help to engage with the people that's most at risk, please. Thank you.
Well, Stan, I've got to say, I would do everything I could to amplify your voice there. I think to our colleagues such as Ruth, Unwin, and others, because I'm a huge believer in the third sector and how they are key to helping to raise awareness, mobilize issues, and to tackle them. I worked for many years for charities in the third sector overseas. And I really, truly do believe in the power of the third sector in charity and social enterprise, in actually tackling most of the big problems that affect societies, both at home and around the world. So I really could not agree with you more than that. And the quicker and the more that policymakers try to mainstream the third sector, and it empowers the people, the third sector, and the deliverers of those services. So you're absolutely right. I completely agree. We've got to figure out how we do that well, though, and that's where I want to learn from you and your lived experience and everybody else here. How, rather than just saying it, what can we put in place, and how do we make that happen in Wakefield? And if we can do it in Wakefield, if we can bring us together here in Wakefield, we can possibly be an exemplar for other authorities, other places, both in this country and elsewhere, to follow our lead. There's no reason. Great things happen by social movements and local ideas and operations, initiatives on the ground. So if we can do something here to improve the condition of people in need in Wakefield, in this particular case, with struggling with mental health issues, and hoping, hopefully, to make sure that we don't get the problems in the first place. Because it seems to me, I'm no expert, as I keep on underlining, and I come with humility to this, but a lot of the triggers and drivers to mental health is because, I think, a failure of us as a society that's allowed people to get into that position. So it's like upstream conflict prevention. There's a lot of things you can put in place first to stop these issues. But thank you, Stan. What you said resonates. Daniel?
Darren Dooley, please.
Hello there, good afternoon. So I'm Daz Dooley. thank you for this initiative, and I hope this is something that's going to be a regular occurrence and something that we can drive forward together. Because I think really what we need, I'm born and bred in Wakefield, smack dam in the middle of the district, grew up, moved away, come back, seeing the changes. And I think what we need to start looking at is preventative opportunities and the reasons that those social injustices are causing the plight of so many people with mental health problems. We have to recognise that if we go back several years, well, several decades, that there were some major shifts in industry in this area. And we're now in the third or fourth generation of people that have never worked properly. They've never had a real meaningful role at work. And therefore, I believe that the people, or many people with these problems in Wakefield, have lost hope. And I think we need to give them hope back one way or another. There's many reasons. So I run a community group called Smash Mental Health, Self-Management and Self-Help. I work for the NHS as a social prescriber. I'm also a public governor at Swift. The services are there, but unfortunately the demand's outweighing the supply currently. And I really don't want to make this a political thing, Mr. Ahmed Khan. I really don't.
Call me Imran, please.
Sorry, Imran.
Let's not make it political.
No, I don't want to. I genuinely, because I think we need a bipartisan approach to dealing with this, because Wakefield isn't just about the city. Wakefield is about Wakefield and the 5 towns, and people have families spread all across the district, and their health and well-being affects the people in Wakefield, and Wakefield's health and well-being affects the people in the 5 towns. So, you know, we need everybody involved in this. There's some fantastic services in there. Perhaps they're not joined us together as they could be, but let's face it, we're all running around like headless chickens currently. The CCG do an amazing job. Swift do an amazing job. The local authority do an amazing job. And all the people on here do an amazing job. But it concerns me that we're all firefighting currently, and we're not looking at preventative measures moving forward. And we need to take a step back. We need to look at the differences in mental health, and perhaps that's part of the problem. Terming it mental health, it's health. We don't carry his brain around in a separate bag. It's part of his body. It affects the body in the same way as physical health affects his brain. And I live with something called GAD, generalized anxiety disorder. I've lived with it since I was a kid. I worked through it. I refused help. I thought I could deal with it myself. I'm a typical wakey guy, you know, big, strong, tough, this, that, and the other. And it's nonsense, really. It doesn't exist. So we need to reach out to people. We need to show them, give them hope, ultimately give them hope. And I think all the people on here and thousands of other people around the district, and I hope yourself included, I hope you mean this, Imran. I really hope you need this, because unfortunately we are facing I'll use the term mental health pandemic of our own, not just in Wakefield. And you know that yourself.
Absolutely, Darren. That's why I called it, because I think it was actually with Ruth I spoke to a few weeks ago at a GCC, a clinical commissioning group. I hate acronyms. I always get them the wrong way around. A CCG meeting, and I was mentioning about the suicide rates. And somebody was on the call with us, Ruth, a gentleman, I forget his name at the time. And
wasn't it?
yes,
Yeah.
and he was telling me that the data didn't really support what I was saying, but anecdotally, it's just overwhelming. So that's why I just think if the data doesn't say it, I want to find out what people are saying, if it's what I hear, and figure out innovative thinking and new approaches so we can sort this out ourselves. And if the data is not telling us it right now, let's not wait till the data to say we were right. Let's start doing something now.
Yeah, I think the problem with the data is it doesn't always recognise the third sector. So I've dealt with personally 19 people who have been on the verge of suicide during the pandemic, taught them round and convinced them to get support. But it's very difficult for me to report that as a third sector community group chair.
Now, you know, Daz, I think I might be just falling a little bit in love with you. because not only are you just like me, a local Wakefield lad born and bred, but you also, like me, call a spade a shovel, which I find very, very attractive. But most importantly as well, you talked about preventative measures. And we've got to deal with the, as you put it, the epidemic that we've got right now. But I honestly think if we're going to look forward and not just be responsive, you said firefighting. If we're going to do that, we've got to look at preventive measures. And the reason this is music to my ears is because for 15 years overseas, when I was doing counterterrorism and in war zones and so on, I would get massively frustrated because we do all this work to deal with the outcomes that could have so easily been corrected with preventative diplomacy, preventative with upstream peace building measures and so on and so forth. So I always think prevention is so much easier, so much cheaper, so much more efficacious, but it's something politically that isn't done, because if there ain't an immediate hit, you can't, it's very difficult. I actually don't think it is, but people think it's very difficult to prove a negative, that we haven't seen an increase, therefore we're doing well. But we've got to be able to, hopefully together, if enough of us speak and change things here, we've got to change that narrative and get people thinking longer term, not reactively, proactively, so people don't have to have that the experiences that you spoke of so movingly and effectively in your own history. And what really got me as well is when you talked about people have lost hope, both in Wakefield and across the 5 towns. And you know, Daniel and Laura, who work with me, will have heard me countless times. One of my great big drivers, and whenever they want to know what I'm thinking, why I'm doing stuff, I will keep on talking about when I knock on doors and I meet, and it's not just young people, I meet people of all ages, and they have there is a poverty of hope. And without hope, how can you have a dream or aspiration? And without that, how are you going to have achievements? And if we've got no achievements, our history as a city, as a country, as a people, is just that, a history. We have no tomorrow. And I refuse to say that we've only got a past and no future. And you touched, I believe, Darren, right on it. It's how do we give hope again? A sense of belief, place, purpose, that everybody can, you know, fulfill their potential. Those potentials may be different, but they can fulfill them. And that's what we've got to do. And when people ask me, and I will get a little political, but I'm doing it in a weird way, when I don't believe leveling up is about filling our northern towns and cities with concrete, cranes and porta cannons and building roads and railway stations and bridges. It's all nice if it's going to be money and connectivity. What it's about is giving people, our young people, especially up here, we've got in Wakefield, below par, worse educational results and outcomes than even our region, and our region is below the nation, the national average. And we have, it's not our young people, they're as canny as anything, they're bright and brilliant. We have let them down by an education system and a care system that simply isn't serving them. And it's not meant to serve us, it's meant to serve them, and it doesn't. So we've got to go radically to think, how the hell, forgive my language, how on earth do we make things worthy, make things work, worthy of our futures? And how do we give people back that hope? And so it's giving people the right skill sets, the right education, and not only till they're 16 or 18, lifelong. You mentioned about industrial changes. You know, when I was a lad, you know, the mines were still open. I remember the Winter of Discontent in 79.
We're same age.
My father was, I was born in 73, September. My father was driving into Clayton Hospital, and there was all of the, I was rather scared at the back. My school was across the road, and I was about 4, and the bins burning with flames and really banging drums and so on. And it's, you know, a generation went without jobs, young men, 20s and 30s, had no jobs, and then their children, you're quite right, what you just said, every single line I find I'm absolutely in solidarity and agreement with you. So it's how we then, rather than just talking, how do we figure out what we can do effectively? And you're right, this all affects mental health. And this is part of it.
We get out and inspire them, Imran. We get out and we tell them that we're gonna give them something. We're gonna trust them to get themselves. Wakefield's full of amazing people.
You're right, but Daz, and words are cheap as well. We've got to do something, and that's why
I've been trying, and I'm looking for an ally. So
I'm your ally in this, but I'm looking. This is why I want all of you assembled. You like my Avengers Heroes Assembled, or whatever that Marvel thing was. I'm looking for ways to realize change. We can't wait for it. It's not going to be given. Whether it's from local government or regional government or central government, we've got to do things ourselves because we've waited long enough. And if we've got good ideas, we can find the resources and the ways to do stuff, but we've got to do it. And you can't expect everybody else to do it for us because they don't have any better ideas. And now I've been in Parliament for a year, I realise that government's no different from any other collection of people, failings and all, and they don't have any sort of magic wand and buttons to press to make things happen. They've got all the same human frailties and lack of ambition or limitations as we do. So I honestly believe, trust people closest to the ground, and let's find it out for ourselves. And if we can make it work for Wakefield, they can learn from us.
Exactly. And there's no lack of ambition on here. The colleagues on here, there's no lack of ambition. I don't know all of them. I know some of them, but we just need the impetus.
And then this is another point. You started out saying, I hope it's a regular occurrence. I'd be very happy to do that if everybody on here wishes to, but as long as we're not just a talking shop. If we can make that regular occurrence something that we're actually working towards something, defining a strategy, building a coalition, so you can use me to knock on doors in government and to heighten attention to things here locally, and together we working to actually achieve something, then I'll be very happy to give up whatever time of mine is necessary for us to make this regular and to lead somewhere. But I'm sick and tired of people promising stuff and not delivering. I want action.
I am.
Okay. Daniel, who's next?
Thank you.
Thank you, Daz. Really, truly.
Can we have Bridget next, please?
Hi, so I'm Bridget Gill from Spectrum People, but I'm also running Wakefield Sea Cadets. I'm involved in a multi-academy trust with obviously lots of schools, and I run a charity over in North Doncaster because I sit in the southeast of the patch, and actually Wakefield and District, where do boundaries start and end? And people live across those boundaries, and actually sometimes we're constrained by that as well. I totally support what everybody says about working together. And actually Safe Space, which Stan mentioned, is a really good example where we listened really carefully and hard to what local people said was needed and what they needed when they were at crisis with mental health issues. And that's how Safe Space emerged. Just to reiterate what Stan said, we heard yesterday that we've got the funding to run that to 7 evenings a week, and that's really important. We don't quite know the start date yet, but hopefully it will be April, May time that we get that underway. But one of the other things that Spectrum People does, and Tina, my colleagues, actually put something up in the chat about it, is what's called social prescribing. And I think it's really important to listen to what people want and to try and help them take their own steps towards whatever it is that gives them more positivity. Because we all have mental health. It's getting better mental health. That's what we're trying to work towards. So we do green social prescribing into Apple Tree Garden, which we run in Agbrigg. We've done lots of art groups where somebody, when they're doing some art which they enjoy, get to talk about whatever it is that worries them, because half of this is actually having a conversation and starting to realize that when you talk it helps. Andy's Man Club does it, Smash does it. I know lots of the colleagues on this call, and I think just whatever works in one area might not necessarily work in another area, but listening to those local people and connecting. There are lots and lots of different roles, whether we call them health navigators or link workers or coaches or whatever, that can join together. And the other big area, Spectrum people, I think the youngest person we've supported is 7 and the oldest is 92. And actually, when I started working there in 2015, they were only thinking it was about adults. And I think actually talking to kids and getting them the resilience there when they're younger. So give an example, when we reopened Appletree last July, and in August, we got National Citizen Service there. I have never seen kids of the age 15 want to weed, but they were greedy because they hadn't been out. They hadn't been doing things. And we have to face the fact at the moment that things are even harder than they were because of the pandemic, bereavement, unexpected bereavement with people, maybe losing lots of people. But equally, that enduring mental health issue, we support people who maybe came through childhood trauma, domestic violence. So it's a mix of everything, addiction, homelessness, you name it. We've tried to help those people. Final thing I'll just say as well is we also try and bring those people in to be volunteers and to spend time with us helping other people, because actually that helps them more than anything. They want to give back when they've kind of taken a step along the journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. You've said an awful lot of very, very interesting things there. And I think, like David mentioned with Mint as well, and everybody else, the support that one gets from groups throughout is absolutely key and essential, and it helps build up that resilience and the heal for whatever the causes are of the issues. But also, one thing I wanted to mention, and you touched on it, was your work you're doing, not necessarily for Spectrum people, but the Sea Cadets, and the way they're working with the Multi-Academy Trust. On another call, I want to have a long conversation with you because I've been thinking long and hard this last year about, it's only tangential to this, but it is related. So if anybody else would forgive me, we have amongst our young people in Wakefield really poor outcomes, both in terms of health. We have way above a national average chronic illness and health and obesity and so on. Pinderfields is one of the most burdened hospitals in terms of pediatric and youth healthcare. And also our education outcomes, as I mentioned. But also in today's modern world, this is where it comes to education. Soft skills are important. How we cooperate, how we problem solve, how we get on with people, how we can sell an idea or a concept or a thing. And for that, the Sea Cadets are brilliant. Also, that sense of pride in their place and discipline. And in Wakefield, we're very, very lucky. You talk about the 5 towns in the greater area. We've got 4,360, I think, from the top of my head, registered veterans living, which is hugely above average, partly because of the limited access to opportunity, and the Army, Navy, and Air Force give huge abilities of opportunity and training and so on. But what I'm hoping to do is boost our sea, air, and Army cadets, and also the relationship with schools, and actually have some form of cross-ministerial support from the Ministry of Health, Department of Education, and elsewhere to do more of that sort of training in what it does in terms of the soft skills and the life outcomes for young people. So there'll be another conversation about that later. But I think it also help education and health and so on across, and soft skills across the school, and build resilience. So that's another conversation another time. But to let you know, I spoke to Gavin Williamson, the Secretary of State for Health, Education, just after Christmas, just before Christmas. And also I was at Scrivenham at the Joint Defence Staff College, and I was speaking to the Chief of Staff there about actually getting a new school in Wakefield on military lines with vocational training and so on. I don't think it's going to happen because I want another free school to complement Kappa, and there's a limit. But we were talking about possibly working closer with trusts in order to build up the element of military cadetships. But anyway, I moved on with a tangent, so forgive me everybody for that. But it is slightly interconnected because these things, opportunities and being involved, really do have outcomes, I'm beginning to believe, in terms of mental health and happiness and so on. Daniel?
Yeah, Sean Rayner, please.
Sean.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Sean Rayner. I am Director of Provider Development at South West Yorkshire Partnerships Trust, SWIFT, but I also chair the Wakefield Mental Health Alliance. So if I could just briefly explain what the Alliance is. And we've just talked about ambition in Wakefield, and the Clinical Commissioning Group and Council were very ambitious with regards to mental health a few years ago and continue to be so. And they created the Wakefield Mental Health Alliance, which brings together the main partners who provide mental health services in Wakefield and commission mental health services in Wakefield to work together as one team. So the Clinical Commissioning Group devolved £85 million to the Alliance for providing mental health services in Wakefield, and it's the Alliance's responsibility to make sure that money is spent to best effect for our local population. And the Safe Space is an example of where the Alliance has prioritised funding, recognising gaps in service and commissioned the Safe Space. And to build on the observations about working with the third sector, we very much value the work of the third sector. Our whole strategy within the Alliance is predicated on that movement away from statutory services as far as possible to support people in the community with early intervention support very early in their journeys of mental ill health. And indeed, we've continued to fund NOVA to allocate grants to the third sector. Over this year, at the very start of the pandemic, we were very quick to do that, and we will continue to do that into next financial year as well. We've got huge ambition, as I said, for the Wakefield population. And through our joint work, we think we will get a better outcome for our service users and carers, and also address some of the preventative measures that we've talked about on this call today. What I would say is that we work very much on data, and our public health colleagues provide some very good data about need and where to target our resources in terms to meet that need. And NHS England the NHS England website has some very good information on mental health and inequalities in mental ill health. We talked earlier on the call about causative factors leading to mental ill health, and those factors are very clear on the NHS England website: adverse childhood health events, poor housing, poverty, traumatic events, poor working conditions, homelessness, incarceration, social isolation and employment. So all those factors lead to higher rates of mental ill health in the population. And a lot of those factors we can't control, but many of those factors we can influence and do try to influence. And certainly we are working much better together in a whole range of areas in Wakefield. My colleague Beate Wagner is on this call, and she leads the Wakefield Families Together transformation in Wakefield, which has seen different partner agency staff come together to work as teams around the school with children and young people, which is starting to make some real inroads into supporting young people early in their journeys of mental ill health and emotional well-being challenges. So I'll pause there because I'm conscious of give opportunities to other colleagues to speak, but I just wanted to highlight that there is some really ambitious aspirations in Wakefield, and through the Wakefield Mental Health Alliance, we're trying to channel those and coordinate real action to achieve those ambitions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean. And I'm going to self-edit myself because I realise I've been gassing too much. So Daniel, if you can move straight on. I'll behave better in future.
Lisa Wilcox, please.
Hi, so I'm Lisa Wilcox. I work at Wakefield Council. I'm Service Director for Adult Social Care, specifically learning disabilities and mental health. So I work really closely with Sean as part of the Mental Health Provider Alliance to try and, take forward all the good work that Sean's just been explaining. Obviously within the council, there's also our public health colleagues who've got a 5-year strategy on suicide prevention, which I think is really significant because it's about trying to do all those things that we've talked about before around raising awareness, making people feel able to get support and assistance when they need it, and at a time before they get to a stage of crisis. From a adult social care perspective, though, obviously we have a responsibility for approved mental health professionals, and my colleagues will be very cross with me for getting that wrong. Approved mental health professionals who are at the sharp end where someone's in crisis with the police for an A&E, who may need consideration whether they need to go into hospital. They do a lot of work to try and make sure that people are supporting the community wherever possible. In the first lockdown, what we noticed was that there was less of those crisis calls, but they've really picked up, and I suppose we're really mindful of the impact and the exacerbated effect of the pandemic on people's mental health. And as you were saying, the real importance of trying to address that, but also that sort of lower level impact on people's mental health, where people are feeling more isolated or more vulnerable or more lonely because of the lockdown implications. So there's a lot about how we can work with the partners, as we've been saying throughout this session, just to make sure we can involve with people and make these connections. So from a council perspective, you know, we're happy to take calls and try and connect people with the right people, to try and get them that right help and support. But we're mindful that, as we've said before, actually, I think it was Darren made a really valuable point, that people can be very put off from engaging with statutory services. It's seen as a stigma, it's seen as a problem, and the real vital role of that third sector support that feels more easy to access and less sort of, I'm repeating myself here, but less of a stigma and less of a negative connotation. And it shouldn't be. Everyone has mental health, but in the right support to help people be able to live well and to be able to cope with their anxieties or the issues that they may be facing. So I'll end there.
Thank you, Lisa. I think it's a good job Darren's off the call at the moment, because he was being very direct when I think Daniel called him Darren, and he said, no, it's Daz. So who do we have next, Daniel?
Tamsin, please.
Hi, so I'm Tamsin Lim. I'm the Operations Manager at the Well Women's Centre. So we're a mental health and wellbeing support service for women in the Wakefield district, covering the 5 towns. We support women aged from 16 upwards. We're also an IAPT approved provider as well. Traditionally, our client group have multiple complex needs which fall between primary and secondary care. So they typically have a history of trauma or adverse childhood experience, but are functioning well enough not to meet the threshold of secondary care interventions. At the moment, we're offering remote services during the COVID pandemic. We're using video platform, telephone contacts, even sending out wellbeing packs as well to our clients. Our referral numbers didn't drop through 2020. Our figures show a year-on-year increase of clients registering to access our services. As a comparison, in 2019, we had a waiting list of 3 to 6 months for our therapeutic services. Currently, we have a minimum wait of 10 months. And to support these clients while they wait longer, we complete additional check-in calls and contacts with them. But this places, you know, a further drain on our services and resources, as does managing increased risk. And typically our client group carries a lot of risk, which we do manage closely. Disclosures of risk are consistently staying the same for us because we do work with a higher risk category of women. But what we are seeing a risk in reporting harm from others. So in the last 2 years, we've had a 37% rise in risk from others. So that could be domestic abuse, it could be children within the home as well. And this year-on-year continuous demand is reflected in an increase of 15% from 2018 to 2020. So that's women initially registering for our services. And we are finding that our funded capacity doesn't match the continuous complex demand that we're seeing. And as I say, we've done a recent consultation with our clients to see about the impacts of COVID, what they need from us now. And that recent consultation, clients informed us they about 80% have been infected by COVID in a negative way. We are meeting their current needs, but going forward, in-person working, peer support activities are necessary to a full recovery. And when we're looking at in-person working, when we get to that safe place again, we're looking at innovative ways of doing that differently as well to meet client needs. So I think from our capacity and what we're seeing firsthand with our clients, there is a real need for 3+ counselling service. So, because we're fighting a growing waiting list of those women who are between primary and secondary care, who need longer interventions than like some of the 6 sessions or peer groups that voluntary second centre service can contribute to. So that's what we're seeing really is the more complex and more adverse childhood traumas that we're trying to meet the demand for now.
Thank you, Tamsin. I'm just wondering, have you the way in which the mental health issues are realised or exhibit themselves in Wakefield, how very different are they than with men? So, for example, with the cases that you get and the issues and the backgrounds compared to, for example, the exclusively male ones at sort of Andy's Men's Club or Smash, have you had conversations together? And are they obvious differences or in terms of drivers and manifestations or not? I mean, nationally,
yes, so
male suicide rates are higher, but how is it locally? Well, how does it realise itself?
As locally, I believe it's male suicide that is higher. But what we see from when I talk about the history of trauma and adverse childhood experience for our client base, it's domestic abuse, which is higher, obviously, in women, is a local and national figure, and adverse childhood. So that's it could be sexual childhood abuse that we look at. We do have meetings with Andy's Man Pub, and we have been partnered. You know, we've been in meetings together. I think it's 2 separate. I think bringing us together and talking about it together would be better, because obviously we're experts in our field for women and they're experts in their field for men. And I can only talk with authority about what we see, but it is mainly domestic abuse and childhood sexual abuse for our women that we see is the adverse and traumatic experience that they've had.
Thank you. Daniel?
Can we have Beata from the council, please?
Thank you. I'm Beata Wagner. I'm Corporate Director of Children and Adult Services. I will be very brief. I know we're running out of time. Just really to say it's been really helpful to listen. I think this has been about listening. But what I would like to say is that it's really positive that we're starting to highlight the impact of lockdown in particular and the restrictions on children, families, older peoples, just the whole population well-being as another strand in the crisis alongside the health crisis and the economic crisis, because I think the actions and the recovery planning around that absolutely has to match those other 2 elements of the crisis. I'd be very, very happy to have another conversation about some of the ambitions specifically around education and young people as well. I think I would say, as Sean does, we are very ambitious and we know that we have a lot more to do, and it's really good, as I say, to have conversations to make sure that we continue to learn and develop. I think one of the things that Wakefield is an example for, in my view, and others could learn from, is the absolute commitment to try and work in partnership and be better as a team than we are individually. The council's approach to the pandemic has been very much to work through community hubs who've been making the contact locally with people and have really tried hard to link with the third sector and local people, because this can't be solved by agencies. This is about all of us. So really to invite us to continue the conversation, to build on some of the arrangements we've already got in place, to have really good conversations. And there will absolutely be opportunities in any changes to the NHS to just push our integration agenda. And we think we're already a very, very long way along the way. And we already know that that is having a positive impact on our residents, but we can always do more. So we need to continue to hear where we can do more and better. Thank you.
Thank you, Beata. And also, I'd like to thank you for all your hard work and that of the team. Being Corporate Director of Children and Adult Services in Wakefield is a tough job, and it's a big job. And you know, the not so distant history of child and care in Wakefield wasn't the thing we could have been as proud of. I have a particular care and interest in it. Both my Auntie Ruth and my Uncle Jeff were social workers in Wakefield. I think my Uncle Jeff headed up Rainey, headed up child services for a time. They're now both retired. So it's the difficulty, complexity, and sheer hard work. My hat off to you and all of those in the areas that you truly it's service. So thank you.
Thank you. Just to be really clear, thank you very much. I'll pass that on to colleagues as well.
Thank you. And often you get the abuse and never the praise. So thank you. Daniel?
Ruth Unwin from the CCG, please.
Thank you. I really just wanted to echo what colleagues have said from the Provider Alliance, Local Authority, the other statutory organisations, that I think we come at this, we're all on the same page in terms of our ambition locally, but also that recognition that the third sector organisations contribute massively in terms of offering access in a way that statutory organisations can't, that they are and we've tried to be really ambitious in setting up something that enables the third sector to thrive as a really valuable contribution to the delivery of mental health services. I think the question that you asked when you invited us was, what can you do as our local MP? And I think I hope what you've heard from what everybody's said is that mental health is not a product of health services. It's a product of everything else, of prospects, of hope, of economy, of access to good housing. And that, you know, as our MP party in government, you've got a very unique opportunity to raise some of those issues in Parliament. I think the other thing that I would say, and it's coincidental really, that the white paper on the NHS was published yesterday, that talks in very strong terms around local determination of services, of integration on the ground. And I guess that's the other thing that you can do as our local MP, is as that white paper makes its journey through Parliament, ensure that local grounded decision making is preserved in that process. So that would be my sort of takeaway message for you.
Thank you, Ruth. It wasn't though only what can I do, because I know the limitations of my direct influence or completely. It's what we can do together and how we can drive change, because this is not for one person to lead, it's for us together to deal with. And that's why you know, politics is not to one side. This is about humanity. It's about human issues. It's about us as a society and what we regard as being of value and what makes us civilized, and you know, and that is caring for each other. And so that's why we really do, I'm hoping, after Daz's suggestion, that maybe we do meet again and follow up and actually try to build towards something that we as Wakefield can lead on and get others to follow. And then if we require resources and stuff, become an exemplar and let them trial it here in Wakefield.
Councillor Fishwick, please.
Simon? I think he's on mute.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much. Some really interesting comments. Councillor Simon Fishwick, Ward 8, Ossett and South, Aubrey and South Ossett, should I say. Just really interesting to hear the views coming from the different charities, Andy Mann's Club and Smash and the other one or two. So it's quite interesting to get some feedback there. Most of you all know my military background, and I've lost a couple of friends just recently, in the last couple of weeks, and only in the last 24 hours, we had a friend of mine who was a service personnel. We managed to talk him out of obviously taking his own life. That was last night. 95 post on social media. He needed help. We've actually got him some help, and luckily, that's not become a statistic. But finding quite a lot of ex-service personnel who I've actually served with, who are all ending their lives rather suddenly. But not only just service personnel, that's other people also in the Wakefield area. So it's quite becoming quite a prolific problem that we do need to get some support and sound advice around people. I seem to have lost everybody.
No, we're here, Simon.
No, so sorry about that. That's just lost my my thread on that. So you know, if I'm available to help with people, I will do throughout this.
Well, thank you, Simon. And I really wish to commend as well your selfless work in the community. But also, I was very, very affected. I was talking to Simon a few weeks ago, and I think it was in the same day or the same week, Simon was a Green Beret, Special Forces, and two of his comrades committed suicide on the same day or the same week, who had served together, known each other for 20 odd years, served Queen and country, all because contributory factors. They'd set up businesses, and you know, with the pandemic and everything else, the business was going to the wall. They'd lost hope. They couldn't provide, and he's unfortunately had more than his own fair share of close friends who've been suffering it. But he was also telling me about, I believe it was you, Simon, about stopping on the side of the road a few times and stopping people committing suicide. And actually, other residents, having on one occasion thought you were when you were just looking at water levels at Horbury Bridge. But it's at least, I'm very saddened to hear about your friend last night, but also pleased that he had the courage and the strength to ask for help, and that you and your friends were there to answer his cry. I'm grateful for that you were there. I wanted to know, because it's what Simon was talking to me some weeks ago. I asked the question at the beginning, but simply those who were left by a simple raising of hands, how many would agree with the general feeling, appreciation from conversations, friends and families and those you know and so on, that severe mental health issues, depression and suicidal thoughts and attempts to suicide have actually significantly gone up, or you're far more aware of them now than you were, say, 1 year ago? So it appears, whatever the data says, that there is a very serious problem, growing problem. Because I want to get a handle on that, because the data seems to say one thing and everybody else seems another. So if just by simple raising of hands, if you could let me, it's just not scientific, just a straw poll. Okay. So, understood. So that's two that don't. And yeah, okay, that's very interesting. Daniel?
Yeah, I can't see anyone else waiting to speak other than...
Come back, because Ruth knows the data. She's always good at all the data for COVID and everything else and so on. She's the lady in there. Can you try to explain to me why it may be that there's this overwhelming perception by this straw poll, and this straw poll seems to go with general conversations and my constituency workload. I mean, I get 200-300 emails a day, and a significant and growing portion of those are about suicidal thoughts, mental health issues, either about my constituent or some close party to my constituent. Why do we have this common perception with our lived experience that is becoming a growing and increasingly serious problem, a pandemic, as Daz called it earlier? But you, for example, who've got the data and the facts, don't seem to share that view. Can you explain that? There must be a reason for it behind that.
I will, and then other colleagues might want to come in as well. But I think in the context of what was being discussed in that meeting, where it was said the actual suicide rate has not gone up, I don't think anybody was suggesting that mental health isn't more of an issue as a consequence of the pandemic. So what data there is about a suicide rate doesn't give you a flavour of of the level of mental ill health, mental distress in the community. So I think the more important thing, a couple of things that have come out of the conversation that we've been having this afternoon, we as a clinical commissioning group, as an integrated care partnership, commissioned that piece of work that Gary talked about, that Healthwatch has done, because we really want to understand what it feels like to live in our community. And whilst Dave's talked about Leeds having very similar experience, it still is our concern that in Wakefield, mental distress is part of people's experience of this pandemic, and it is important that we make a response to that. So we've commissioned that. I think one of the other things that Daz talked about is maybe some of the soft intelligence that the third sector organisations, maybe we're not collecting that in as productive a way as we could do. And I think that was a good point, that we can look at how we do that. I don't know, other colleagues might want to add.
I completely agree with that, Ruth. And in terms of both Daz's point, and I think Bridget made a similar point about third sector and their experience with data. Are there ways, I'm not saying we should do it now, are there ways we can possibly organize systematically their snapshots of data, both qualitative and quantitative, to give us maybe a better picture? Because hard data is not always everything. A lot of it can be, the qualitative analysis based on qualitative data can be really helpful for us to understand what's happening in current trends. So if we could, Ruth, possibly find a way of how that can be incorporated better, it might be of utility.
Yes, I think Sean was probably wanting to come in on that, because it is fundamentally part of what the Provider Alliance is seeking to do, is what's the intelligence that we work on. So
yeah, absolutely. And the feedback that Gary Jevons presented on this call today is feedback that we've received in the Alliance. And what we try to do is triangulate the hard data. A suicide is a tragic event, everyone, but it is recorded as suicide by the coroner, and it is a fact that the suicide rates are not increasing in Wakefield or West Yorkshire during the pandemic. But we have seen, as Ruth said, increases in mental ill health and express need for support, and we triangulate that qualitative data within the Mental Health Alliance to try and mobilise our response to meet that need.
I don't disagree with the word you're saying there, Sean, but this is where I think, and it's nobody's fault, I'm not pointing fingers, please don't think I am, I'm trying to look for solutions of how we can serve our communities better. I think there's obviously gaps in the data. As you say, suicide is recorded by those that the coroner at an inquest has determined to be suicide, and it fails to all of those attempted suicides, those foiled suicides, those failed suicides, those that were suicidal, but their friends and family, like Councillor Fishwick's call last night, brought people back from the brink. And I'm just wondering, those reports all well and good, but in terms of sort of an ongoing, continuously updated dashboard, so we can see what the drivers are and what other environmental and other factors can possibly lead to increases and reductions in such behaviors or thoughts, it might be useful. And I'm not saying I've got a solution. This is a learning exercise and just a thinking exercise. It may be entirely unworkable what I'm trying to suggest or get to, but I wonder whether it's worth pondering a little about whether we can maybe have that sort of a dashboard idea and whether it would be of any utility going forward. Again, I'm not expecting any answers now. It's just out there for people to think on. If that's everyone now, I'm afraid I apologise for going over on time. Are there any last comments that anybody wishes to make?
Just one last thing, Dave from Mint wanted to just say something at the end there.
Oh, please, Dave.
Yeah, just I'd say thanks for this. It's been very interesting. We're obviously new to the Wakefield area, but we do have two groups, a group for men and a group for the ladies, that we're going to be running out of the riding centre. Mm-hmm. They've very kindly given us a space there, and we're also looking into turning that into a mental health cafe where we can operate workshops from. But they're also giving us the space in the riding centres to host some awareness events. And I'd certainly be interested in working with some of the other groups here and getting them on board with that as well. So yeah, I hope we could do this again and moving forward, all come together and do some good.
And I think I just saw Bridget's hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention a couple of other things. We've been running some things which are called Wakefield Talks. It's a bit of a thing like the TED Talks. Just 10 minutes for people to give a view of what they do and for anybody to join. And that's proved quite successful. We're going to doing our 5th one in a couple of weeks' time. And also the Positive Mental Health Network, which is an affiliation of about 130 different groups, where we send out a regular newsletter just talking about what's going on so people can pick up more and more ideas, because it is cross-fertilization and how we all work together. So both those are useful networks to think about as well.
I always call it cross-pollinization. It's a little bit less direct. But tell me, because I'm utterly unaware of this, it's brand new to me. When you say a view of what they do with the Wakefield Talks, are those people coming in just to say what they do, or is this can you explain that a little further?
So it's organisations saying what they provide, which people can engage with.
Thank you. And in terms of Dave's comment, I think there will be utility. I'll ask Daniel to follow up with this meeting and for everybody's ideas and how, if we do a follow-up, if there's a desire for a follow-up, what form that should take and what our objective should be in terms of outcomes rather than just talking, because I always think things should have a real purpose. Did I think somebody was wanting to speak? Yes, go ahead, Tamsin.
I just wanted to add that just out of your personal interest in the military, that in the Wakefield district, Wellmean Centre and Turning Point Talking Therapies, who are commissioned by CCG to provide IAPT interventions, that veterans of the armed forces are prioritised for mental health interventions on both sides. So we do offer that for any veterans of the armed forces. But I just wanted to add the Wellmean Centre are happy to add qualitative data to what you're looking for, because part of our risk management is identifying and separating out risk to self, harm from others. And so we have those figures ready to go whenever is available. It's part of our risk management. And to say that we're happy to build on networking with other third sectors, especially we have links with Nova, Lays and Diversion, Wakefield Domestic Abuse Service, as well as Turning Point Talking Therapy. So we're happy to build on that network and willing to.
Well, thank you very much. And I think it'd be very interesting for me to understand further as well what your qualitative data points are and how you find they're useful and how can be used. That's just for me as a learning to increase my knowledge and understanding of what can be and cannot be useful in terms of signposting and indicative work. So thank you so much. Daniel, has anybody else in the chat room, because I can't see that, I'm not savvy enough, wanting to say anything?
I believe that is everyone.
Hi. Oh. Hi, sorry, it's Dina Kirkby. I've had to phone in. I did send a quick message. I have been on the call throughout. I don't know if anybody can hear me.
I can hear you. Did you say Dina?
Hi, it's Dina. I'm from Wakefield Talking Therapists. So as Tasman's just mentioned, we offer primary care mental health services across the Wakefield district. So I'm conscious that we've run out of time now. But again, just to kind of echo about the partnership work that we do across the district, which actually, I think is really good. And as Sean mentioned earlier, we've made a huge investment in terms of mental health. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that we were represented on the call today, because it's really important. And I'm interested just in how we can take this forward, moving forward.
And Daniel, do you have Dina's email addresses and organizational details and so on, so that you can be included in the follow-up?
Yes, I do.
Wonderful. Well, I do thank you all for all your time. I've learned a great deal and a greater appreciation. And I do hope that this will be, we can actually derive something from this, and it's not going to be anybody's wasted time, or as Daz feared, no outcomes. and we can sort of build towards doing something to help people in Wakefield. But thank you very, very much indeed. And I wish you all a very good weekend. I know that Ruth has got her big call coming up very shortly. Was that already happened?
It's every other week, so it's next Friday. You've got it to look forward to then instead.
I was thinking you've been very, very, very calm with this when you've got that huge big call coming up, but no, it's next week. Okay, take care. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.